Welcome back. President-elect Donald Trump promising there will be, quote, all hell to pay in the Middle East, unquote, if Hamas does not release the remaining hostages being held in Gaza before his inauguration next month. In a Truth Social post, Trump warns, quote, those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now. Meanwhile, ceasefire violations between Israel and Hezbollah are mounting less than a week after the deal took effect. The U.S. reportedly telling Israel it's concerned that this deal could unravel. Israeli Defense Forces also accusing UN peacekeepers who are supposed to be helping monitor the ceasefire, but they're accusing them of enabling the Hezbollah terrorists. Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Maria.
First, on President Trump's post, all hell is coming to the terrorists who are holding those hostages if they don't release them. Your reaction?
Well, certainly he's reinforcing, what Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying for some time, and I think everyone in the Middle East recognizes that the incoming administration is going to pretty much support what Prime Minister Netanyahu has been attempting to achieve from the outset. And that certainly is to defeat Hamas, which they've done militarily, and then destroy the remnants of it as much as possible. And obviously, President Trump is supporting what took place with Hezbollah and that ceasefire, although we know from the outset it would likely be fragile. I think Iran and the proxies recognize full out that the idea of micromanaging Prime Minister Netanyahu, that the incumbent administration has been doing, holding back weapons and not providing them all the support is going to change on January 20th. And they're certainly bracing for that. I think Iran, just as Russia is doing and China is doing, has to be reassessing the situation in terms of the U.S. presidency and the fact that President Trump has a history of not appeasing our adversaries, but actually confronting them. And that certainly will be the major issue that they're reassessing. How much of their goals can they still accomplish with this administration?
I wonder if that's going to be enough to move them to release these hostages. What do you think? What does your gut say?
Well, it comes down to, Sinwar wouldn't do it unless the Israelis completely got out of Gaza. And the people that took over from him are saying the same thing. However, they initiated the negotiations that are going on now. Hamas did. And that's very different from where we are in the past. And we'll just see. Look, we've been down this road since December of last year when the 105 were released. And there's been so many false promises. And the administration always spun the fact that we're getting close, we're getting close, we're getting close. And we never got there. So I don't have any optimism about it. Let's just see what takes place here.
Yeah.
And certainly Israel, frankly, is not leaving. And as a matter of fact, Israel is constructing plans to really occupy the Gaza Strip in terms of a multi-year occupation. They know full well that they can't walk out of there, turn their backs on Hamas, and then they'll obviously reorganize, re-equip, and at some time re-attack. They've got to monitor the situation, and no one else is going to come and monitor the situation effectively for them. They realize that now.
Yeah.
So that's what's ahead here. We'll see if this new leadership of Hamas is willing to make a deal on the hostages or not. Obviously, they have not up until this date.
As Syria is bubbling up, right, and continuing, the U.S. is now calling for de-escalation in Syria after the Syrian Islamist forces seized control over most of Aleppo, Syria's second largest city, in a surprise offensive over the weekend. The Syrian army launching airstrikes on the rebel forces in and around Aleppo yesterday in a joint attack with Russia. Iran-backed militias also crossing the border to bolster the Syrian army. Iran is claiming the U.S. and Israel are behind this renewed fighting and challenged the Assad regime in Syria, General. Assess the Syrian military here and this situation.
Yeah, well, it took 4 years for the Assad regime to take Aleppo, assisted by a huge amount of Russian carpet bombing and the rest of it. It was actually killed tens of thousands of people. And in 48 hours, this Islamic militia took the city back. I mean, it is stunning for that to happen. A couple of reasons for it. The Syrian military, their ground forces, has always been inadequate. The major ground force that fought against the opposition forces for all these number of years was Hezbollah. Tens of thousands of them there, to be frank about it. Where is Hezbollah now? They are not in Syria. They have been dealing with the Israelis. So that's one thing. Their most effective ground force is no longer there. Number two, the Syrian army that is left is demoralized. They have no will to fight. The economy is in the tank. The people, in a sense of despair and hopelessness themselves, and obviously the army comes from the people themselves. They all have families. So when the militia approached the city, the army just fled. They just collapsed, took their uniforms off, and collapsed.
Wow.
There was hardly any fighting whatsoever. Now what's taking place is the army is making a defense north of Hama, which is a city south of Aleppo. Russian air power is into it now and is bombing into Aleppo. And it remains to be seen whether they'll be able to hold that or not. I don't see the Islamic militia going all the way to Damascus and threatening the capital city. But this is a major turnaround, certainly, in this war. And it also reflects the complications that are going on in the Middle East with Hezbollah dealing with Israel and Hamas, and both of them back on their heels with significant losses and degrading. And I think Iran is back on its heels. Look at, they never did the airstrike back to retaliate. I think Israel took away their air defense systems, and Iran knows full well that they attacked Israel again, that they're naked. They're absolutely defenseless against an Israeli air campaign. So I think Israel, it seems obvious that they were able to deter Iran. They escalated, and as a result of that, they deterred Iran, and that it means it's very successful. Back on their heels, and here comes the Trump administration. Appeasement is over, and they're going to, I suspect, privately and maybe somewhat publicly, they're going to tell Iran in no uncertain terms, this business of attacking U.S. bases in the region is over. Firing missiles at our warships in the Red Sea, trying to keep the Suez Canal is over.
Yeah.
And this kind of aggressive and malign behavior in the region, we're going to stand up to it. I suspect that's what's going to happen, and the Iranians are bracing themselves for it.
Yeah, that's very promising to see the Iranians on their heels. And then there's Ukraine, General. The Biden administration has announced a new $725 million weapons package for Ukraine. Less than 2 months to go before President-elect Trump returns to the White House. NATO's Secretary General is also warning Trump that the U.S. would face a dire threat from China, Iran, and North Korea if Ukraine is pushed to sign a peace deal with terms that are favorable to Russia. This is Secretary of State Anthony Blinken attends the final NATO foreign ministers meeting of the Biden administration. That kicks off in Brussels today. Ukraine is expected to be the focus there, General. Look, I understand all of these adversaries are on the march, but this continuation of giving money and weapons to Ukraine, is that in jeopardy as Trump enters?
Well, I think what's going to happen here, President Trump will get an assessment of what's taking place in Ukraine, certainly, and take his classified briefings, which I'm sure he's done by now, and get his national security team together. The reality is, you know, Ukraine has destroyed half of Russia's military capability today. And think about that. We haven't expended any soldiers in doing that. We've provided them money. The Europeans are on record now of providing more support than we're provided to Ukraine. Ukraine is not the obstacle to a peace deal. Russia's the obstacle. The Ukrainians want peace. They didn't want war in 2014. They certainly didn't want it in 22, and they certainly would like it to end now. They're the victims of this aggression. But Russia is going to dig their heels in. Russia thinks, because there's been so much talk about the United States pushing Ukraine into a deal, that Russia has the upper hand, that they're going to try to extract concessions out of the United States, even if they go into negotiations. Right now, their position is they're going to stiff us and not go into negotiations and attempt to get it. I say give the Trump administration time to get settled here. Give General Kellogg time to get his team around him and assess the situation. And what we need to do, I think, is go into negotiations, strengthen Ukraine's hand, give them the leverage to go in there, and let's make a deal that's favorable to them. We're not neutral here, trying to arbitrate between a union and a corporate headquarters and make the deal fair to each other. That's not our position. Our position should be we favor our partner, and Russia committed this aggression. Let's get a deal that's favorable to them.
Well, I mean, does a deal mean that Ukraine has to give up some land?
Yeah, well, Zelensky's been saying that privately. Now he said it publicly. Yes.
Yeah.
The answer to that is yes.
All right, General, it's great to see you, as always. Thank you, sir.